Test. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cisco U Theater. My name is Patrick Gargano. I'm a content developer with Learning and Certifications, and I'm just here to introduce these folks that are behind me. So something special for you this afternoon. We've got a learning partner here to, present some really cool stuff about Meraki and Catalyst switches. And when I was talking to Alan about doing a session and he suggested this topic, I thought right away of worlds colliding, and I flashed back to Seinfeld, because this is literally what's happening here. We're going to take your Catalyst switches, and we're going to bring them into the Meraki portal. So next half hour, that's what we're looking at. Alan and Alex are with Current Technologies, Platinum Learning Partner, and we work closely with them to deliver course content that you guys consume. So it could be Meraki content or SD-WAN content.
Yep.
I think we're good.
All right, thank you, Patrick.
Enjoy the session.
Welcome, everybody, to the Cisco U Theater. Today, we're going to talk about, we've had Catalyst switches forever, right? A lot of you guys have gone out there and deployed Meraki APs everywhere, right? And so when we've done that, we've lost sight of how do I get from the Meraki AP in the dashboard and see the switch to the network, right? So we're going to show you how we can now import basically the Catalyst switches as read-only switches, and now the Catalyst switches show up in your dashboard, so I can now see the ports, I can see traffic. In a couple of weeks, you'll actually be able to do packet captures. So no more having to go to Catalyst and do embedded packet captures. I can go directly to the Meraki dashboard and capture a port right then and there, right? So just quick introductions. My name is Gardner. I'm the CEO of Current Technologies, triple CCIE. If you want to email me, or there's my Twitter feed, right? Alex here, right? She's one of our senior instructors, right? So today we're going to talk about Catalyst onboarding of the Cisco switches. Now, something really, really exciting happened on Monday. Does anybody know what happened on Monday when it comes to Catalyst switches? Not only can we now monitor Catalyst switches, we can actually bring them fully in as an MS390 firmware, and now I can basically configure, right, my Catalyst switch in the Meraki dashboard. So not just monitoring, but actually full configuration, right? Now, features are not equivalent, so you need to look at that, right? But that's an exciting thing, right? So the first thing here, right, that we're going to talk about is, right, what we get out of this. Single pane of glass. I don't need to go into the CLI to look at show commands, right? I can see most of the traffic analytics that I need directly in the Meraki dashboard for all my Meraki APs and cameras and everything else, right? Now, we can also see alerts, right? So just like you get Meraki alerts for your APs and your cameras and your MXs, we can now get those same alerts, right, from the Meraki dashboard for our Catalyst switches, right? So what are the things we get out of this, right? Centralized view of the entire network. So just like you're used to Meraki maps, where I can see all of my stuffs in a map, you're going to see the same thing for Catalyst switches. Okay? We're going to be able to see real-time status of switch, right? Remote monitoring, layer 7 visibility. Now, the layer 7 visibility we're going to talk about in a minute, but it requires a DNA Advantage license. If I have a DNA Essentials, I get everything, but I don't get the traffic details. And then finally here, right, we're going to see network topology. That's our map. So what qualifies for it today, right? Today, we can do the 9200s, 9300s, 94 or 9500s. On the roadmap, we're going to see 9400s and 9600s, which are the chassis-based. Not here yet, but coming, right? So versions, 17.3.1 to 17.9.2. Most of 17.9 works that we've tested, not 17.11. Right? And which is going to be a little bit confusing when we talk about management, because on management, you got to start at 17.10. But for monitoring, up to 17.9. Right? So if we look at our two different types of licenses, right? Essentials, DNA Advantage, right? They all get you the read-only configuration, the converged client view, right? Live feeds, right? Now, firmware isn't there yet, but at some point here, right, shortly, we are going to be able to do the Catalyst upgrades directly from the Meraki dashboard. right? So that's an awesome feature. No more having to go download the bin files, and then if you get tar files, you got to explode them. You got to do all the other stuff, right? So we're making your life a lot easier in the Cisco world, right? So unified topology, right? Again, the big difference between essentials, we don't get into that client stats. And what's really cool here with client stats is I can go in and I can see, how many of my people are going to YouTube, right? How many of them are going to TikTok? How many are going to places where, in a normal network, we want our guys working, not playing. So our onboarding flow. So how do I get from a Catalyst just being a CLI switch, right, to being a Catalyst that's in the Meraki dashboard? Now, a caveat here. DNA Center, right, and Meraki dashboard, not yet together. But in near future, right, you'll be able to have a switch in DNA Center and in Meraki dashboard for monitoring. Right? So we have some configuration we need to make sure it's on it. Right? We have an API key to load it. Right? We need to download an application from the Meraki dashboard and run that application to onboard the switch. And then finally, device is onboarded. We need to verify it. Now, how many of you guys have done Meraki at some point? You're familiar with the dashboard, right? I assume most of you guys in the room, right? So the first thing you got to do, right, is you got to go into the org and turn on API access, because by default it's not turned on, right? It's secure. So the first thing you got to do is go into the API or the org settings, turn on API settings, right? And then you need to generate a key, right? An API key. So that's under your profile. So once you do that, you go to your profile, right? At that point, you're going to generate a key. They get a max of 2, right? And the key thing is you got to make sure you write them down when you generate them. Because as you can see in the slide, what happens after you generate them and come back to it? You don't see the whole key anymore, right? So you got to make sure you save that key from the start.
Dashboard does. Can you guys?
Your mic's not live.
Okay.
Right? So, right, pre-configuration. What do I need to have on the switch in order to onboard it, right, inside the Meraki dashboard? Right? So first thing, right, because we're using TLS and we're using certificates, guess what's got to be on there, right? Time's got to matter, right? So you got to have an NTP server. Okay? Second thing is, which most switches are going to have this, but we have to have a route out to the internet, right? Because why? The minute I onboard that switch to Meraki, it's got to be able to get to the Meraki dashboard. So that switch has to be able to reach, right, outside to the internet. Also, we need to make sure we have a couple VTY ports that are open. We need to make sure the DNS is turned on, right? So we need a DNS server, and we need IP space domain lookup, right? And again, we've done that for a while on switches, right? If I want to be able to resolve a name, IP domain lookup. We need a user level 15 privilege, right, to onboard it. Now, if you're using TACACS today, right, we need a local account. We can't use TACACS or Radius today. Will be in the future, but not today. Today, we need a local account with privilege level 15. We need to initiate a AAA new model, so bring up a new security model so the Meraki can actually put security on the switch. Right? We need loopback 1000 and 2000 and use that during the deployment to bring it up. Now, once we've done that, switch has its basic configuration. At that point, I'm going to come up to the Meraki dashboard, and I'm going to download an application. Right? So that application has to have some things available to it, right? Again, I said IP domain lookup, right? Here's why, right? We see that we need API Meraki.com, right? We need Meraki Cloud monitoring in AWS. And depending on what region you're in, right, we also need some regional gateways. And again, we see the Americas, EMEA, and APAC. So depending on what region you're in, will depend on which URL it will go to. All right, so once we get the application, what does the application actually do to onboard it? So we see here, right, the first thing it's going to do is create the Meraki account. Right? It's going to create an SSH session over port 2222, right? It's going to look at my routing, right? We're going to do some netconf, right, some API stuff. Right? We're going to initiate the ATI or the VTY ports, AAA, right? We're going to create some loopbacks, tunnel interfaces, a peer certificate, again, NTP, right? Then we're going to enable CDP and LLDP, right? Because in Meraki world, in order to generate those maps and some of the other things we do, we need to be able to reach out to all those different devices. So, right, download the application. So you'll notice we're running on the new interface. The old interface has the same thing as well. So if you haven't updated your Meraki interface to the new look and feel of Meraki, the old interface still has the same kind of download. So we're going to go to the dashboard, network monitoring, and then we click on add devices. And when we click on add devices now, you'll notice that there is now a little button to say, hey, I want to onboard Catalyst switches in Meraki. And when I do that, I'm going to click on that, and it's going to then bring up an application, and it's going to say, hey, what are you running? Right? Most people in the room probably running Windows. You can run a Mac, right? You can run Linux. We have onboarding for all 3 operating systems. So we're going to download it, install it, and once we've done that, right, it's going to come up and it's going to run. Right? First, agree to the Meraki terms saying, hey, we're importing this switch into your environment. Here's our terms and agreement. Right? Now, remember I told you have to go get that Meraki key, that API key. So the first thing it's going to ask you for is, hey, I need an API key that has read-write access into your org because I'm adding devices into your organization. Once I do that, then I'm going to say, hey, what organization do you want to put it in? If you guys are like me, I have several orgs, right? And if my API key is tied to several orgs, it's going to prompt you and say, hey, which org do you want me to put this switch into, right? Because not only that, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about, hey, not only which org, but which network we want to put it in. Right? So step 2, IP address of the switch. Now, if I'm typing a private IP address in the application, what does that mean, guys? That application has to have IP connectivity to that switch. So you got to be inside the network when you run this application. You got to have direct IP connectivity to get to the switch to onboard it. Yes? Speak up.
Do you have to add switches to the inventory first before you go and add them in here? And the answer to that is no.
Nope.
So when you go in and add them directly into this way, it's going to put it directly in the network, and you'll see it on the inventory as well.
Yep. So first we're going to give it the IP address, right? Remember, we told you we need an SSH account. That's the next thing, right? Privilege level 15 account that I can connect to the switch and put a bunch of commands on it. Right? From there, right, it's going to come out here and say, hey, I want to make sure that I can connect to it. And here's a caveat. During the connections, I need Telnet and SSH enabled, right? Just for the onboarding. After you onboard it, what should you guys all do? Take off Telnet, right? So during the onboard, we need Telnet. After the onboard, take Telnet off. Okay. So then it's going to go through and it's going to ensure that I did what? NTP, right? That I can reach out to the internet, right? That I can do the pre-check things. Then I'm going to come up and I'm going to say, hey, you've chosen the organization that you want to put this switch in. Now, what network do you want it to be part of? Right? And again, simple location, right? Networks for Meraki networks are typically locations. Now, next, right? It's going to come up and it's going to say, hey, we've given it the IP address, we've given it the org, right? We've now given it the network. Now we're going to come into confirmation and we're going to do show details, because what show details is going to now show us is here are all the commands that I am going to put onto that Meraki switch to now, or Catalyst switch, so it can now be monitored by Meraki. Right. Now, a couple of caveats here. One, how many of you guys run, right, NetFlow or CFlow on your switches today? Okay, there's some caveats around that, because what we want to do is we want to put NetFlow settings to talk directly to Meraki Dashboard. That's how we track all the client settings and everything else. So if you're already pointing, you may need to go back and do some work on that. Right, so you can scroll all the way through here, right? So we see anything from the cloud monitoring configuration to device access to TLS tunnel setups, and you can see all the commands that's going to deploy to that switch. Now, the cool thing about Meraki monitoring is it's not stopping me from at some point then going in and changing the configuration on the switch. So I can still go in and do my switch port mode access, switch port mode trunk. I can still do all my normal configuration. It's just now being monitored by the Meraki dashboard. So in here, next, right, you're going to see, and at this point, it's going to now, right, deploy it to the switch, right? The switch is going to then reboot, right? And at that point, right, it now shows up in the Meraki dashboard. And the key thing is, what do you see here? It says monitor only, right? Now, one cool thing that I want to show you. So if I come over here to my networks, and let's come down here to network. And again, I said this released on Monday. What do you now see here? Right? You don't see anything. I can now fully manage that switch. In fact, what it does is it installs the MS390 firmware, right, on the switch, and now it's just like a Meraki switch. Right? But you're limited to Meraki configuration, not IOSAC configuration. So, with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Alex, and she's going to talk about some caveats with monitoring or show you some monitoring. There's 3 beta features, right, that you won't see in the interface yet, but you will see one of them is really, really cool. The packet capture, right? The other one is show commands. So directly from the Meraki dashboard, if I want to do a show IP interface brief, or I want to do show interface so I can look at stats on an interface because I'm not looking at the Meraki dashboard. Today it's show. In about 6 months, what do you think the next step is? 6 months, I'll be able to configure, right, directly from here, right? So it's not in the interface today unless you're in the beta, right? And the other thing is how many of you guys are familiar with the command show log, right? How many of you guys hate that command? Wouldn't it be really nice if all of our logs showed up as events in the Meraki dashboard? That's coming too, right? And with that note, Alex is up. Give me 1 minute, I'll show you the stack.
I'll show you the stack. So, next piece we're going to talk about is now once we go and onboard our Catalyst switches into the Meraki dashboard, I'm going to take you guys through a few slides, but then actually do a demo and take you guys through the dashboard and show you what the monitoring piece looks like. So, in case anyone hasn't seen what the switches pages looks like, this is what it looks like. But now we can see we have our 9K into the dashboard. Now, again, this section is purely on the monitoring piece. So we see that monitor only tag there as well. We can also go in and we can see connectivity. We can see firmware versions. So we see the iOS XE 17.9.3. We can see our model. So we're using a 9300. And then we can also see the local IP of that device as well. So it's nice because it looks just like a normal Meraki would or a Meraki switch would in the dashboard. Now, if I go in and just come back to the last slide and just like any Meraki switch, go in and click on the name, it will bring me to, oh, I forgot I put this in first. Sorry, let me come back. I'll show you that in the demo. But we can also go in and do switch stacks here in the dashboard as well, kind of coming back to that question. So if I have 2 9Ks, I have my stacking cables in between the two. So again, I can see stack cable 1 here connects to stack cable 2 over there. We can go in and do a switch stack between Cisco 9K switches here in Meraki. So this is what they'll look like. They look just like, again, if I had 2 Meraki MS350s, they look very similar to that. So we can see the name of those switches. We can see the status. For anyone who loves our blinking LED tool, we can run that here as well. For anyone not familiar, I click this button and it flashes all of the LEDs on the switch. Very nice for if you're remote and you're trying to figure out where something is. Now, we can also go in and see the model over here on the right. And we can see some of the ports down here as well. And we can see our uplink port here with port 1. Now, traffic analysis. And this comes back to what Alan was talking about earlier. So, again, with the 9Ks, we have our 2 licenses, right? Advantage and Essentials. So going into this a little bit further, if you are using the Advantage license, we can go in and do in-depth traffic analysis. Now, let's talk about this here for a few minutes. So clients connected via cloud monitoring with a DNA Advantage license will be able to include client-level traffic analytics if enabled. Now, keyword if enabled, because remember that in the dashboard, by default, what is our traffic analysis set to? Basic. So if you don't go and set this to detailed, you're not going to see that in the dashboard on the client's page. So you're going to want to make sure you go into network wide and the general page, go down to traffic analysis, and then go in and click detailed for those statistics to come up. Now, also something to keep in mind, the Catalyst 9500 series do not send application data due to the dashboard due to hardware limitations. Now, this is set to be added eventually, but it's just not there right now. Now, alert settings. So just like we can go get alerts for normal Meraki switches, we can also go in and add alerts here for the 9Ks as well.
Isn't that awesome, guys? Wouldn't you love your Catalyst switches to tell you when something's going up and down?
So we can go here, and now you can see under switch, look at what we see. Meraki and Catalyst. So we can go in and we have it, the switch goes offline. We have what port. So if a port goes down for more than a certain threshold of time, if any port changes link speed, if the power supply goes down, or if our network usage exceeds a specific amount in a specific time period. Now, something cool about these as well is you can always go in and show additional recipients here as well. So if there's someone specific you want those alerts to go to, you can click this and then insert in that email of who you want to receive those specific alerts. Now, troubleshooting council. So this goes into what Alan was talking about. So we can see that council down there. Now, this is a beta feature. Again, this is not full-blown as of right now. But this is what it looks like.
And it doesn't show up. So you got to get in the beta if you want it to show up.
Yes. So here we can go in under terminal. And we can go in and open a terminal, which we have done down here. And again, the terminal is only allowed as of right now to do iOS XE commands such as show. So looky, looky, no touchy, touchy. Now, 2 things. First thing here, we can go in and basically for the onboarding that Alan was talking about earlier, if you want to see a step-by-step demo of how to go in and do the onboarding application, one of the Cisco TSA members has actually gone in. Now there's no sound, but it will go through and take you step by step of how to go in and bring up that onboarding application. Now, I'm going to go ahead.
And so while she's doing that, that's awesome. So that when you want to do this the first time, right, you have a step-by-step video that'll walk you through all the different steps you need to onboard into monitoring mode, right? And while this is getting ready, at some point, me and Patrick, who introduced us, are going to do a second session on managing at some point in Cisco U. So if you haven't looked at Cisco U, something you want to look at. Not sure. Talk to me afterwards.
Hey, Ellen.
Did we lose the screen?
We've lost the screen.
Try that.
When in doubt, do a shut, no shut. Let me bring a little bit of humor into this.
There we go. Here, I'll get you out of that. Get you the Meraki dashboard.
No, it's got to be here.
There you go.
So I hope everyone can see this okay. But here we can go in and we can see the Meraki dashboard. I'm going to zoom in on this just a little bit here. Let's do a little bit less right there. So here we can go in and let me switch networks here. Excuse me, organizations. There we go. So there we go. So here we can see we are in the switches page. And we can go in and just like I said a few minutes ago, we can see our 9K switch. Now, if I go in and click on it here, we have our monitor page. Now, this is why I had it zoomed out, was so that you could see almost everything. So we have 4 tabs at the top. So summary, ports, location, and tools. So over here in the summary tab, we can go in and see all of the ports on the switch. Again, just like typical Meraki devices, we can see that port 3 is our uplink. So again, this is the port that allows that switch to talk to the cloud. If that port has trouble, that's not a good thing. We can see we have a few PoE ports plugged into some other devices as well. If I go in here and hover over, we can see port 1, and I can actually see my gigabit Ethernet shortened to GI in the dashboard. So we can see GI 10/1, and I can see I have an MR57 plugged into this port. And we can also see trunk and other port information here as well. Now, we can also, if we have modules connected, we could go in and see those here as well. Now, also stack ports. So I currently do not have this switch in a stack, so we're not seeing anything there. Now, if I scroll down a little bit, we have historical device data. So by default for the last day, and we can see we had a little bit of an outage here, but I can go in, same as normal Meraki devices, last 2 hours, last day, last week, last month. Now we can also go down and look at client usage, and I can go in and see my clients here as well. Now, if we look on the left-hand side, I can go in and see the name of that device, what model, it's Mac, and again, in this case, it is monitor only. We can see where it is. This is located at our head site back in Northwest Indiana, so we can see that there. We can also see IP address information, so LAN IP, public IP, gateway, and DNS, which in this case, we're using Google Public DNS. If we had IPv6 for the LAN enabled, we'd see that here. We can also see the serial number. Now, no, there are now 2 serial numbers, one for the Catalyst and then one for Meraki. So we have 2 different serial numbers. We have device tags, which if anyone is not using device tags, they are great, and you should be. Allows you to go in and look at specific data. We can also go in and have any notes that we want to additionally have here. We can put them here as well. Firmware version, VLAN profile. So there's a default profile for the Catalyst devices that we can use. And topology, which we'll also see here in a second. If I go over to ports, we can see all the ports on that switch. So I can go in and see them all individually. I can also come up and I can click on view ports on this switch. And it will take me to the switch ports page. So I can go in and I can see all of my individual ports. And just like a Meraki switch, I can select multiple. And again, this all we're really doing here with the 9Ks, because it is in monitor mode, is tags from this page at this time.
Yep.
Now, if I go ahead and go back.
So one second before you go back, one of the cool things there, guys, is you saw all the green, right? So if a port ever goes down, even if it was yesterday, we're going to know and see when that port went down.
Yes.
Right?
And a cool trick here on ports for anyone who doesn't know it, if you want to look at an individual port, you can actually go here and click on an individual port, and it gives you a whole page for each individual port for you to look at as well. Now, if I go location, that's going to show me, again, just like Meraki devices, I can see the topology, I can see a photo, and I can see where it is on the map. And if I go down to tools, we can see ping, cycle ports, and we can do the MAC forwarding table here as well.
Awesome thing. Shut, no shut, cycle ports.
Yes.
Right? Just click on the port, cycle it, boom, done.
And you can do individual or you can do ranges, as we can see up here on the example as well. So again, other pages here. So we see our switch ports page, we see our stacks, which we talked about earlier, and then we have all of the configure pages for that switch as well. And that's, Alan,
that's it.
Anything you want to add? That's it.
Guys, thank you very much for coming.
Oh.
We get 30 minutes. I can answer some questions. What question you got? You will see power, right? So again, this is expanding. So as we build in more features, and basically the idea behind this, guys, is a unified platform. So if I have a Catalyst switch, I can attach it to DNA Center. I can attach it to Meraki Dashboard, right? Same way with APs. We're not talking about APs today, but look at the CW APs. I can register them in the Meraki Dashboard, or I can do them in the 9800 controller, right? And caveat, 9,800 controllers are going to get the same functionality for monitoring, right? That's awesome, right? Yes. Don't know. We can talk offline about that.
Hey, Alan, really quick. One thing to note too is that Meraki does have an insider group.
Oh,
So if you guys are not a part of the community, I highly recommend scanning the
Yep.
QR code and going and joining the Meraki Insiders group.
Yep. And last thing, please fill out your surveys. So he's sort of looking at me like time to go. If there's any questions, I'll take them off right over there.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Huh? Oh,
Oh,
yeah. Let me
how
put
you
that
doing?
back up.
Good.
Yeah, sorry. I'm only going to show it for a second. No problem.
Sitting on 800 controllers, so the Meraki